Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the briefing session for the Booster Fund 2022. I'm so glad that you have made the time to be here with us this morning. As you're aware, this is a non-mandatory briefing session linked to the Booster Fund 2022. So today we are very excited to launch the third iteration of the SMME Booster Fund 22. But before we get into the proceedings, let me introduce myself. My name is Joshua Wilmrans. I'm the Director for Enterprise Development, and I'm ably joined by my colleagues, which is Mr. Sharif Davids, also from the Enterprise Development Unit, Ms. Rafika Mosafal, who's from the Municipal Economic Support Unit, and Mr. Johan Bester, who's also from the Municipal Economic Support Unit. And they'll capably be able to join me today. They'll be part of the proceedings today and also be responding to some of the questions that you have for the panelists this morning. So we will now officially kick off. I think we were expecting a bit more participants, but I'm sure people will join us. But I think we want to also respect your time and you've made the effort to be with us this morning. So today we're launching again the SMME Booster Fund, which is the third iteration of the SMME Booster Fund that we've launched first in 2019. And I think as a department, we've been very excited about the impact of the Booster Fund and how it has been critical in terms of supporting businesses, especially through navigating through the COVID-19 pandemic. And I think what has been encouraging for us is that the business that we've assisted has predominantly remained sustainable, contributed towards the job creation, as well as making sure that we grow the economy of the Western Cape and we make sure that there is sustainable businesses. I think one of the key lessons that we've learned, I think, especially given the impact of COVID-19, is the importance of some of the support measures that the different organizations has contributed to the success of these businesses, especially areas such as mentoring and coaching, which has been critical for the businesses to navigate the impact of the pandemic over the recent past. So the session today is basically to inform potential organizations or municipalities about the Booster Fund and its operations. So we have learned, I think, through the various iterations of the Booster Fund, and I think we're trying to improve the system as we go along. And I think we've been encouraged in terms of the Booster Fund 2021 about the significant quality of the applications that we've received. And I think that becomes quite critical because it then becomes a very contested space in terms of who do we approve for funding, because I think the quality of the applications has been significantly improved in the last round of the discussions. So we look forward to receiving excellent proposals for the Booster Fund that will continue to focus on job creation and growing the economy and creating sustainable businesses within the Western Cape and the South African economy. Before I'm going to continue with the presentation, I'm going to ask Gabriella Meyer, who's hosting this platform of the session today from Westco, just to take us through some of the basic house rules. And then we'll continue with the proceedings after that. Thank you, Gabriella.
Hi, good morning, everybody. As you know, I'm Gabriella. I am just here for tech. So any tech queries you guys have, please could you put it in the chat box if you are struggling with anything. And if you see at the bottom of your screen, there is a Q&A box as well. So if you can put all of the questions in the Q&A, that would be great for more effective, But yes, if everybody as the panelists can just keep themselves on mute as they are presenting. Yeah, have a great session. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Gabriella. Colleagues, can I just check, are you able to see my screen?
Hi, Josh. Yes, just put it in presentation mode.
Okay, thanks, Johan. Okay, There we go. So the purpose of the SMME Booster Fund, as some people may know that has been party to this process with us, I think since 2019, is to look at enhancing and or expanding projects or programs of both existing and new projects aimed at the development and growth of small, medium and micro enterprises based in the Western Cape. So when we talk about expanding or growing those particular projects or programs, it's more focused on, number one, how do we because of the partnership arrangements between ourselves and those supporting organizations, is about looking at how do we either increase the number of businesses that can participate in the program, or how do we look at the increasing the number of support interventions to those particular businesses. So in terms of who can apply, it's open to organizations or municipalities that are implementing both business development support programs and access to markets programs to support businesses in the Western Cape. I'll give some greater clarity on that as we go along in terms of the presentation. The other area is important dates. So applications were closed at midnight on the 27th of June, 2022. So I want to just urge the organizations to make sure that your applications are submitted timelessly, because we're not going to extend any time or anything. So we're going to be adhering to those criteria quite strictly. So just in terms of what are our expectations in terms of the SMME Booster Fund. So in terms of the rollout. So the key focus for us is as a department, one of our key priorities is job creation and economic growth. So for us, a lot of the support that we're going to provide to organizations, one of the key things that we will look at is to what extent is this resulting in job creation in those interventions. And in that sense, enabling the businesses to grow and to expand. Obviously of key importance is making sure that we retain the existing jobs within those businesses that we are supporting as well. And I think important for us as a department is how do we leverage resources to enhance the sustainability of SMMEs in the Western Cape. So for us, I think the critical part of it is the importance of partnerships in terms of making sure that we can both create jobs and we grow the economy of the Western Cape. So the first category of support that we're looking at in terms of the SMME Booster Fund is the Business Development Support Program. And that category will focus on assisting SMMEs that are owned by youth, women, and people living with disabilities, and we'll be including social enterprises. So the fund will provide financial support to enhance and expand programs and projects that offer basic or holistic approach to business development support. I think, and I'll expand on that also at the later stage. And the kind of support that we're looking at, but it's obviously not limited to these kind of areas, would be mentorship, coaching, marketing, branding, operational support, capacity building, provision of bespoke support, like such as the procurement of machinery, equipment, licenses or accreditation, and business support training to SMMEs. Because what we believe is that not only one intervention is able to change the trajectory of a particular business. So we're looking at a series of interventions and support measures to assist and support the businesses. One of the things that I must just highlight, if your program that you're going to present or the proposal that you put forward only focuses on training and capacity building, those are projects that we're not going to be considering. Because based on prior experience that we've had, training and capacity building on its own doesn't necessarily significantly change the needle or the focus in terms of growth trajectory of a particular business. So we're looking for support measures where there's a number of interventions that gets presented to the businesses as part of that support offering to the business. The other category then that we're looking at is access to markets. And there we're looking at support to businesses that want to access economic opportunities that is both within the public sector and the private sector. So corporates, and here there's three categories that we're looking at. So it's, for example, corporates, business incubators, and or organizations directly implementing enterprise and supply development programs that enables SMMEs to access market opportunities. So we know that there's a number of organizations that are currently doing enterprise and supply development programs, and it's about supporting those organizations or incubators or even corporates. Then there's also organizations that are enabling SMMEs to access market opportunities, both within the public sector and the private sector. And then the last category we're looking at is organizations that are involved in import replacement and or export development as part of supply chains. So the nature of the support in that sense should focus on developing the capacity of the SMME to one, export. So that would be include, but not limited to, issues around certification, labeling, equipment, and inventory. So obviously we know if you want to, as a business, want to, for example, export your product, you need certain HACCP, for example, requirements, such as FSO requirements and things like that. So that becomes quite critical. The other area would be around support provided to where we want to look at measures to pursue to increase local demand through, amongst others, increasing the proportion of local goods and services and reducing the imported content or procured by both government and the private sector. So here it's focusing on how do we make sure products that are being imported at the moment, how do we develop the capacity of businesses locally to be able to manufacture those particular types of products. So in that sense, you're adding to the manufacturing base of the Western Cape economy. So those are the two broad categories that we're looking at in terms of business development support and access to markets in terms of where the applications can be launched. So there's a number of qualifying criteria, and I think what is critical that before you apply, you need to make sure that you look at the call for proposals, and the qualifying criteria and the compulsory supporting documents. And please familiarize yourself with that because I think that becomes quite critical. And I'll explain that as we go for a later slide. So there is the type of information that must be submitted. So number one is the criteria that we're looking at is the organization must be in formal existence or formally registered for more than 5 years. So the organization must be tax compliant at the time of application. So a valid tax clearance verification report that is not older than 30 business days as at the date of submission of the application must be approved. Also, one of the criteria also, obviously, before we sign the agreement with the successful applicants, you obviously would have to be tax compliant at that particular point in time as well. So the organization must have obtained an unqualified audit opinion during its latest financial period. So the project or program that assistance is being sought for must either you must be an existing project with a proven track record. And I think as part of the criteria, we're going to ask you to list examples linked to that in terms of the application process. In the case where it's a new project, and this is a new category that we've introduced to allow for levels of innovation, the project must be already in implementation stage. So we're not going to support necessarily a new project if it's something that you just conceived or thinking about. So we're looking at projects that are, even if it's a new project, that is already in implementation stage. So the value of the funding that will be required must not be less than 2 million. So if you're going to come with a project to the value of R1 million, it's automatically not going to be considered. So the organization must also demonstrate an own funding contribution of 50% or more, because I think what is critical for us is that we want people and organizations to have skin in the game, because we're putting in taxpayers' money to support businesses, but we want to support organizations that are already committed to doing the same as well. So it's important for us to see that organizations have some vested interest in this particular process. So the project or program must exclusively benefit businesses that are located and operating in the Western Cape. So any businesses, and we've had an example or two of this in the past, where they want to support businesses outside of the boundaries of the Western Cape, we will not support an application like that, because the funding obviously comes from the Western Cape government, and we want to focus on supporting Western Cape businesses only. So obviously this involves for beneficiaries and not for, I'm talking the small businesses and not for the organizations. Organizations obviously can be located anywhere in the country. Then also in terms of the exclusions. So we will not consider applications for the Booster Fund if it's about covering operational expenditure not directly associated with the project that you putting out for that. So for example, when it comes to salaries, rent, insurance, account, or audit fees, we're not going to be looking at funding those particular types of projects, as well as project management fees or project administration fees. And I think what's also critical, ladies and gentlemen, is that only applications submitted via the online application system will be considered. So if you're going to submit any documents, hard copies, we're not going to look at those kind of applications as well, because also based on previous experience that we've had with when stuff gets submitted, stuff gets lost. So it's only via the online application process. So just an overview in terms of the process we'll embark upon in terms of selecting the successful applicants. So number one, we're going to have a pre-evaluation committee. So there's 3 committees. Let me just take it up front. Those committees are all independent committees, and there's no 2 people sitting on the same committees linked to those things. So it's committees that are operating independently of each other. So our financial management team will look at all the compliance criteria. So for example, if there's minimum criteria that's set and compliance stuff that you must adhere to, if it's not submitted as part of your application, it will automatically be disqualified. So you must make sure that, as I said, you must go through your call for proposals and the other documents, make sure that you comply with all the relevant documents and submit that accordingly. Let me also just emphasize that the department is not going to call you to tell you that you haven't submitted your tax clearance submit document, because from an auditor's perspective, we're not allowed to access the system before the time. So the only time we can access the system is after the closing date. So we're not going to check up on anybody whether you submitted all the documents, just to ensure fairness in the process, because I think it will be unfair if we call 1 or 2 organizations to say, you need to submit this information, and we don't make contact with other organizations to give them the same level of courtesy. So we've obviously engaged with the Auditor General. This is part of their recommendation. So this is the approach that we're following in terms of making sure that the process is open and as fair as possible in terms of the adjudication process. Then we'll have a project evaluation committee, and they look at the various evaluation criteria. They have got score sheets. They look at they've got a minimum threshold, and they will look at the merits of the proposed projects and the impact that the projects will have in terms of the overall objectives that we've set. And they will obviously then make recommendations to the adjudication committee, who is the decision-making body within the organization. And that's predominantly consisting of senior managers and possibly outside representatives that will make that decision based on the proposals that get submitted by the PEC. So the PEC will therefore then list or evaluate the applicants proposed by the evaluation committee, and they'll then look at, based on the available budget, what are the type of projects that we can support. And I must just emphasize that over the last 2 iterations, the proposals that we received far exceeded the budget that we've had. So I must just emphasize that it's a very competitive space. And so if you need to make sure that the project proposal that you submit needs to be of a particular quality and must basically meet the requirements of the department in terms of what our overall objective is linked to the SMME Booster Fund. Following that, organizations will be notified, and I can assure you that our processes are fairly efficient, and organizations will be notified that they were the successful candidates. And then also you're going to have to enter into an agreement with the department in terms of what you've proposed in terms of the project and what the deliverables will be. So the agreement will basically outline those areas of deliverables, what you'll achieve. Part of that also would be then also be linked to the disbursement of funds. So if you specified you're going to be doing A, B, and C, we will make sure as part of that agreement those things gets recorded. So before a payment gets made to any organization, you must ensure that those deliverables are achieved within the specified timeframes, because obviously we need to disburse the money before 31 March 2023. So as part of that disbursement process, we'll also conduct site visits, and the site visits will be to the organization itself, the beneficiary organization. but also we'll be doing site visits to those businesses that you are supporting, because we also, from a governance point of view, making sure that you also comply, that the business are benefiting from the funds that are being disbursed by the department. Then there's also a monitoring and evaluation process of the beneficiary organization. So even after the project is completed, there'll be continued monitoring and evaluation to look at what has been the impact of the particular project. So colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, that is my part of it. I'm going to hand over to Mr. Johan Bester to basically look at the online application system. Over to you, Johan.
Thanks so much, Josh. Maybe before we go to that section, can I just quickly highlight a couple of common questions for either yourself or Sharif to answer?
Sure, Johan.
Yeah, so there is one common question that has popped up asking if individual businesses or SMMEs can apply.
Okay.
The other one is regarding the 50% co-funding. People would like to have clarity whether that 50% is of the total 2 million rand minimum threshold, or if it is above that. So in other words, can people apply for 1 million rand and match 1 million rand to make the 2 million, or is the 2 million the full amount that must be applied for from DEDAT, and a further 2 million rand must be provided on top of that? And then there's one more. No, those were the two most common ones that have been asked so far.
Okay, thanks, Johan. But I think, Johan, before we respond, I think maybe just take us through the online process, and then we can take it from, we can then respond to the questions at the end. But we've taken note of the questions so far.
Thanks so much, Josh. If you would just put the slide on quickly, and then I will do so. Josh, will you just share the presentation again?
Oh, sorry.
No worries. Thanks so much. Good afternoon or good morning, everyone. Just to give you some background on the application system, as Josh mentioned, this system will only be an online system. I myself will be helping people facilitate this. If there is any questions on how to use the system, the email address that you can contact us will be at the end. So there is an application guide that we drafted that can be accessed either via the DEDAT Booster website or via the link that you see up top of the screen there, which we will also share with all participants. Just to note that the web application only functions on Microsoft Edge or Google Chrome. If you need help installing Google Chrome, there is a link and a how-to section in the how-to guide that will also facilitate that process for you. So as you can see on screen there, the system requires you to sign up and create a profile. Once you've signed up and created your profile, your application information will be saved on that profile, and during the course of your application you can go back and forth using the save function to access your application. So you do not have to worry that everything needs to be provided one shot. You can do this over the course of a couple of days to make sure that all the information you provided is correct. So once you've created your profile, and I'll do a little tech demo just now, you will navigate to the program section where you can apply here for the Booster 22 Fund, which will then assist you in your application process. Josh, next slide, please. So just to give you a quick rundown of what the application system looks like is once you've created your profile, as I said, and you go to the program section, you will see an application selector here where you can either click the business development support program or the access to markets program, depending on which support you are requesting. You are also encouraged to save regularly through your application process. As I've mentioned, there's save functions plastered everywhere through the application process. So this also just ensures that if something happens, such as load shedding, at least your application will be saved on the system and you can return to it at a later date. Should you require any technical or clarification on your application, the email address that you can use is DEDAT, DEDAT.boosterinquiries@westerncape.gov.za. There is a very able-bodied team that will assist within 24 hours of your request, except on weekends, of course, and we will provide clarification where needed. Josh, I think that is it on these slides. So what I will quickly do is, if you stop sharing, Josh, I will quickly do a tech demo for everyone just to show you what this actually looks like. And let me just go to the home page. I assume everyone can see my screen here. And I just have a confirmation from one of our team.
Yes, we can, Johan.
Awesome. So once you've logged in using the URL DEDAT.booster.westerncape.gov.za, you will be presented with this screen. Normally what would also happen is you'll have a little login section there. I am already logged in. The process is explained how to log in the how-to guide. You will select programs. It takes a little time to load, but there is our Booster 2022 program. You will click apply here, and then you will select which category. I am, for sake of exercise, just going to select access to markets, and it will present you with tabs that you can navigate through and input your information. These tabs all the blocks and information do use auto verification. For instance, here you will see if I type in a number, a little thing will pop up just to reinforce that the cell phone number is only a number. And if I try to type in any other characters, it will prevent you from doing so. So another thing to note is if you are uploading any information, which it does require you in a few fields to provide supporting documentation, you can upload them in PDF or image format. But before you do so, it will require you to save your application before uploading, which you can just simply do by clicking the save button. Once you've done that, I haven't inputted any information yet, so it's not really letting me save, but it will let you save. You can upload your information. There are 3 fields that you should also take note of, one being the budgetary field, the cash flow, and the implementation timelines fields that have a bit of a rubric. This is explained in the how-to section, but just to show you how it works, is if you click the add row feature here, it will allow you to put in information there, a little budget description, and what the funding will be used for internally or externally. You will then be able to input your budgetary amounts, and it will automatically sum these for you and provide you with a complete overview of your budget. Please note that this funding for the budget takes into account all funding streams that you have, from the DEDAT funding you are requesting, to the own funding you are providing, to other funding from outside sources that you will be using for the project. You can add all the rows there indicating all budget items, which we will be used to consider your application. Secondly, the cash flow. What we would like to see here is when the money will be spent. This you need to just take note of, that we are only looking for the information here that you are requesting funds for by the department. In other words, the section here under DEDAT funding must correspond to your cash flow projections here. So we would like to see how you will be spending our money. This section is quite simple, and you can just add rows and rows and rows. And add your information there. So it's just, again, I'll just do a quick test case to show you, and we go 10,000 there, and or 100,000 there, and then I'll do 1 million here. So this is how you fill in the cash flow and implement the cash flow section. The implementation timeline works similar to the cash flow, but it has one little extra bit here, which I'll get into now. But basically, these are just the activities that need to align to your cash flow and your budget items and any other implementation aspects that you have throughout the course of your project. This is also quite simple. Luckily, you don't have to input any numerical values here, but simply click on boxes to show when a specific activity will be taking place. You will see that this only runs with to the end of our departmental financial year. If your project, however, overruns this, in other words, if you have activities, say in April, June, July of 2024, simply add a second or third year to show what activities are happening within this financial departmental financial year, which you will see runs from April 2023 to March 2024. So again, all of this is available on our website. So if you have trouble finding it, just search for DEDAT Western Cape, and it should be the first link on your Google results. And you will see it is currently plastered all over our homepage. So if you click on the booster landing page, it will navigate you here, from which you can download the call for proposals, which also highlights all the categories that can be applied for, as well as the qualifying criteria and the obligations and application process. We also have the call for proposals for both access to market and business development support, which also provides you with an application guide. We strongly advise that you review this application guide before starting your online application to make sure that you have all the necessary information required, along with all the other background and compulsory information that you need to provide. Finally, at the bottom here, you'll see the how to apply section. If you click this, it will give you the how to guide, which is a more in-depth version of the talk I just presented, which will provide you with all the steps necessary to comply and complete your application process. Again, if anybody has any issues where they get stuck with technical or queries on the criteria, there is the email address again. Sorry, let me just make it as big as possible for you, that you can use to direct your questions to us. Thanks so much, Josh.
Thank you so much, John, for sharing, I think, a lot of the technical stuff and trying to ensure that people are able to navigate through that particular process. So what we will try and do now, we will respond to some of those questions that are being posed in the group chat. And I'm going to ask one of my colleagues, Sharif, maybe just to start responding to some of the stuff. And we've picked up also some other questions in the interim that we'll also then try and respond to as quickly as we can. Thanks, Sharif.
Thanks, Josh. I think the first one is the 2 million, 1 million sort of question. So the minimum amount of funding that you would need to apply for from the department is 2 million rand, which means your own contribution would be a minimum of 1 million rand. I think Marius Dupree asked a similar sort of question. So yeah, so if you've got a sort of project, and you want to enhance it or you want to expand it, you need to make an application of at least 2 bar from the department, and your own contribution would have to be minimum 50%, which is 1. So if you make an application for, say, 5, your contribution would have to be 2.5 million rand. Okay, I think here's another question. Similar caller wants to know the specific requirements in terms of the 50% co-funding. So that would have to be a cash contribution. So if you are, for example, if you are requesting funding from the department to increase like mentorship, and that funding is the minimum, which is 2, you would have to spend R1 million in terms of mentorship as well. Okay. The other question was, is this funding for individual SMMEs? No, it's not. This is for organizations that supports SMMEs. So if you are an individual SMME, there are funding facilities available through like government agencies such as CIFA, the National Empowerment Fund, and the IDC. So this is totally different to what those agencies offer. Are there any other questions, Joshua?
Thanks, Sharif. Sharif, I will try maybe to respond to 1 or 2. In terms of the feedback from the application process, so we'll obviously notify all organizations that we've received the application, but then subsequently we will only inform you after we've made a final decision of the particular proposal that was submitted to us. As I've indicated, our processes are fairly efficient, and within a very short period of time, organizations will be notified and informed in terms of the outcome of the particular process. Also, there's a question linked to when the funds must be spent. So all the funds must be spent by the 31st of March 2023. But it doesn't mean that the project needs to come to an end. So we're funding projects, for example, in the past financial year, so you can continue post-March 2023, but in terms of the disbursement of the funds to the different organizations must be completed before the end of March. In terms of also the sharing of the presentation, we can definitely do that after the meeting. Then also just in terms of the question linked to POPI, so the idea is that we obviously need to be cognizant of POPI and what the POPI requirements are. So we don't expect organizations to share information of businesses that could be contravening the POPI Act. So we obviously ask you to be mindful of that particular issue as well, Ben. Thanks, Sharif. I mean, I don't know if there's any other questions, Johan and Rafika.
Josh, if I may, on the POPI, just to add to that, the department is wholly compliant with POPI regulations. Any personal information that is shared with the department will be placed in our POPI registry. I think from experience from last year, we did require or did ask that if, for instance, telephone numbers is one of the things that fall under the POPI Act, is that we require the organization that is applying to get permission to share the information. But once it is shared with the department does not disperse that information or use it for marketing or any such things. If there is a specific question regarding our POPI compliance, that documentation can be made available, as I know that there is currently the POPI regulations available. Yeah.
Thanks, Johan. Just also there's a question from Sanele. So yes, the Booster Fund supports businesses, both formal and informal businesses. So there's no specific criteria linked to that. So yeah, just to respond to that particular question.
Joshua, sorry, there was a question around past projects. What type of past projects have you funded? And if people can have a look at the past projects. So I'm not sure. Yeah.
So in terms of the past projects, I mean, that we've funded, it's basically been projects in those particular categories that we've identified. Previously, we funded projects in, for example, infrastructure support, but we've not been able, because of budgetary issues, not been able to fund that category for this particular round of the Booster Fund. But I think in terms of being able to see it, look, we don't have it available. And I think also we don't want to necessarily give people access to that kind of project information, because we're also looking for something different, something new. So we don't want to kind of repeat of stuff that has been presented already. But I mean, I think the information is kind of available in terms of what are the type of projects that we have supported, and we've made some of that information available, not in terms of the detail of the project, but just in terms of the type of support that we provided to businesses based on those particular categories. So if you look at the detail of the two categories, that's the type of support that we've given to organizations based on the proposals that they have presented to us. I don't know, Rafika, is there anything else that we haven't dealt with or that we haven't picked up?
Nothing from my side, Josh. Those are most of the questions, or we've covered everything.
Okay, I see there is a question also from, I think, from a few people about the presentation. We can make that available, and we can liaise with Westkro also just to make the recording of the session available as well. Then. So colleagues, I mean, I don't see any additional questions coming. So if there's no additional questions, I think then that would be the end of the session. I think we've tried to respond to as many questions. I think there's one of the questions also dealing with the tourism businesses. So there are organizations such as CEDA, obviously depending on the specific type of support that you will require. So there is, as Sharif said, the other funding organizations such as CIFA, IDC, and there's also organizations such as CEDA that provides business development support to SMMEs as well. So hence also the idea with the Booster Fund is to more support organizations that are supporting SMMEs and not individual SMMEs, because there are support available for individual SMMEs in that particular regard. So ladies and gentlemen,
Josh, sorry
sure,
to break
Rafika.
your word. There's one last question that I think we can just provide input on is, can the entity do contribution in terms of project management costs and other related costs?
Sharif, will you respond to that?
No, any sort of project management costs are for your own account. So again, the approach of the SMME Booster Fund is we want to enhance or expand your project as an organization. So the project management cost will be covered by your organization. Okay, there's a few questions. I'm going to just read it out and maybe have a response for you. Does the SMEs have to be in business for a minimum number of years, have financials? No, that is not a requirement. We do, however, require, or we are required to monitor the impact of our project on these businesses. So they would have to have some M&E, or your organization would have to have some M&E in place that that we can sort of get back to, where we can look at their turnover, how it has been impacted, and the contribution. There's the question about the project management costs, which I have answered already. There's another question. Please clarify, can a business apply directly or must it go through an organization that supports SMMEs? So again, a SME cannot apply for this funding. As we've mentioned, if they want to apply for funding, the CIFA, CEDA, the NEF that they can approach. So the Booster Fund will support a project where, and again, our assumption is that the organization's project has got a database of SMEs that they support. Yeah. Okay, I think that's about it. Again, the project management cost question. We do not fund project management costs. A question again, will this be an annual funding program? We've had it for the past 4 years. So again, the approach that government takes is we need to demonstrate success of our sort of programs, and we would then have to apply to our provincial treasury for funding to roll it out again. So whether it gets continued or not depends on the performance of the actual project. Okay. Josh, I think that's about it.
Cool. Thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, I think we'll give it another minute or so if there's any other questions, and then we can, Sharif, you can then close off after that.
Okay.
I think there's another question from Jennifer around the project management or overhead count as co-finance.
Yeah, so again, the answer is we do not fund project management cost, and we will not fund overhead as well. Yeah, so again, the assumption is that you as an organization, you are running, you have got an office that you are paying your salaries, you are paying your rent. That is not for our account. Our account would be for specific interventions aimed at the SMME. So keeping your organization running, that's for your account. This co-finance,
Sorry, just to, I think also just a point of clarity is that operational costs do not contribute to the 50% or more contribution to the support package. So the 50% contribution needs to be directed at enhancing or running the actual programs applied for, if I've got that correct.
Yeah, then again, okay, Jennifer, I see you've got another question. We will not consider your operational costs that you pay as co-financing. So your rent and your salaries that you pay will not be considered as co-finance.
Sharif, I think there's just another question, clarity on Jennifer's question.
Cash only, yeah. So we would, because we require contribution of your spend, it will have to be cash only. So yeah, I'm just trying to think of an example. So if you offer business development support and you are like providing mentorship to 50 businesses and you want to increase that by 50, we would want to see your mentorship spend on those 50 businesses. Lucanio, I don't understand your question. Josh, I don't know if you can have a look at the question posed by Lucanio James.
No, I'm also looking at that, Sharif. I'm not quite sure because Lucanio, just on that one, I mean, obviously there is a category called business development support, but maybe if you can just give some clarity on it, what you're actually asking, because I'm not quite sure what you're specifically referring to. So obviously we will, one of the key categories is business development support category. And I've listed in the presentation a number of areas, but I mean, obviously it's not limited to those areas, because obviously we want also organizations to come up with their own innovative projects. So I mean, as long as we can see in the project proposal that there is value being created to the businesses, and we're looking at job creation, those are the kind of initiatives that we will definitely be funding and supporting. So as I said, we've got limited budget. So we're obviously going to look at those businesses and those organizations that submit proposals that kind of meet the requirements of this department and we think will add particular value to businesses in the Western Cape. So in terms of whether you're an NGO or not companies, I mean, we've had in the past organizations that, I mean, you don't have to be, we've supported NPOs in the past. So it's not saying that we're not funding NPOs. I hope that answers your question, Lucanio. Okay. Cool. Ladies and gentlemen, I think that is the end of the session. I mean, there's no open questions at the moment. Just there's a question from Juliana. She wants to start a funeral service business. So Juliana, Sharif already indicated we're not going to fund individual businesses. There are service organizations that do look at funding of funeral services businesses. I know the minister, the national minister, made it quite clear in a meeting in Mossel Bay that organizations such as CIFA will look at those kind of funding of those type of businesses as well. So you can feel free to apply to Small Enterprise Finance Agency. They've got an office in the Western Cape. Their provincial manager is Mr. Sean Charlie. So you can also then liaise with him around funding for that. But we're not, through the Booster Fund, not funding individual businesses. If you're part of a broader organization, then that becomes, then it's okay. But I mean, if you're an individual business, we're not going to be able to fund you in that sense. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much. We've come to the end, I think, of the briefing session. We don't see any other questions coming up at the moment. So we're hoping that you will obviously submit your proposals before the closing date. And I would obviously urge organizations and municipalities to make sure that you do it way before the time and are not rush. And there is, as Johan indicated, if you have any technical difficulties, there is an email address that is available that you can submit any queries to. And Johan and the team will obviously then respond to those particular issues quite timelessly. We check those things on a daily basis, so we will respond immediately to questions that gets raised and highlighted to us. But thank you very much for availing your time and for being part of this briefing session. And we look forward to receiving your proposal by the 27th of June. So thank you very much.